All right, paint is on the frame. Still drying. Nothing special. Tractor Supply paint. Some spots look to be drying a little weird. See that? Strange. Don't know why. Don't care. I was out of gloss black, so I shot it with, it's actually matte black with the hardener in there, which maybe that's why it's making it kind of like some spots are shiny looking and some spots are kind of matte. And matte is what I want, but I don't want to shoot it without the hardener. It's much more durable with the hardener, and it dries because it may never dry without a hardener. some of that cheap paint, man, it will never dry unless you put a hardener in it. But anyway, it's painted, ready for the America's Most Beautiful Roadster show. Yeah, that's what it'll be, or maybe America's Most Not So Beautiful Pickup show. Yeah, but it'll work. Hey, welcome back to Rust Order Garage and the $5,000 budget build 56 Chevy pickup. Haven't updated the budget in a while. We will be updating it after this video because it's time to spend some money. But not too much money, of course. This is a budget build. And if you see here, the frame is now painted black. And that's with leftover paint, of course. I had some primer left over from the 51 Hudson build. Use that. I had some really old Tractor Supply Magic black paint in a can. Wasn't much, but it was there. And even worse, I had an opened container of the hardener for that stuff. Now, if you know anything about hardener for paint, it's got a shelf life, I think, of 4 hours after you open it. This could have been 40 months. It is old, and it was like syrup pouring it in. I was amazed it wasn't just hardened solid. But because of that, the paint kind of dried a little splotchy in places, but you know, it is what it is. I wasn't going to go buy a brand new thing of hardener just to paint a frame. It's not that kind of build. It's a street car. And if you build street cars, you will learn that painting the frame is a great idea. It's good to protect it and keep it from rusting. But as far as it being perfect, nobody cares. You don't care. Nobody else cares. No one's going to look at it. You're not going to even look at it. And most of it's going to be covered up by the body. It's nice to paint it because it keeps it from getting, I guess, rusty again. But who's kidding who here? This thing will not see rain unless it gets caught in the rain. It's certainly not going to see snow. And, you know, it's going to be a nice weather toy for sure. And you could drive it in the rain, yes, but most people don't. Anyway, yeah. So the frame is painted. So that means it's time to actually put it back together because I need to get this thing rolling again because I need this lift for something else. All right, and there it is. And about all you can say about it is it's black and it's one color, and that's just fine with me. I had it on the rotisserie, so I got to spin it upside down, paint the underside just as horribly as the top. At least it's all equal as far as bad, but that's okay, not a big deal. So I need to get this thing rolling because I need to get this lift available for something else that needs to get done. But regardless, let's start putting this thing back together. Now, I cleaned up one side so far, cleaned up all the pieces, painted the brand new caliper red because all calipers must be red. It's just law. And I cleaned upper control arm and repainted that. I'm just using like mineral spirits to clean stuff up. And then just spray bombing it. Cleaned some of the hardware up. Took the shoes out so I could spray the calipers. Pads rather, not shoes. This is not a drum brake system. Still have the original rotor. Just hit it with a wire brush to clean the surface rust off and spray bombed it. So, nothing but left to do but to do it. Let's put the driver's side of this suspension back together. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is put the spindle assembly in, which means I need to put a new lower ball joint into the spindle, and I will go over all the prices of all the parts at the end. As I was talking about earlier, you know, the original ball joints were 3-piece. This is the replacement, 1 piece. And these are not expensive. You might spend $50 for all four, and they even have them on Amazon. I have a bunch of my, usually buy them on Rock Auto, probably about the same price. But I just keep this stuff on the shelf in bulk because I do, if you haven't figured out by now, I like this Jaguar suspension. So I keep this stuff on the shelf because I put these Jags in a lot of different vehicles. Again, if you are new to Jaguar front suspension, you get independent front suspension, obviously. All forged control arms. They're made to handle weight. 4-piston power disc brakes. And of course, quick ratio power steering, rack and pinion power steering. For cheap! And the even better reason, or say more common reason that I use this instead of, say, the Ford Crown Victoria front end, because I've been asked about that, is the track width. The Jag is narrow enough that it's pretty much dead on with older vehicles. Crown Vic is very wide, pretty limited on what I can put that in. But I will be trying a Corvette front suspension soon enough. But that's neither here nor there. I won't worry about that. Let's try to get this thing together. All right, so first thing I'm gonna do is put the lower ball joint into the spindle. Now, again, some differences. First, we'll just point out that there is a machined lip inside the spindle there. You can see it, okay? That is for the ball joint to sit in. So this will sit in here nice and flat. Now, this is the bottom of the original 3-piece ball joint. See how thick that is? And there's how thick the new ball joint is, okay? So the bolts have a shoulder on them. Make sure that they don't bottom out in the spindle before they tighten this up all the way. You may want to put 5/16 lock washers on the bolts just to take up some of that shoulder so you know that they don't bottom out. Now, these ball joints come with the locking tabs. Rather, they were originally on the car. They do not come with the new ball joints. And they're probably one-time use only things, you know. So I've used them and reused them in the past. I don't have any others. What I am going to do is Loctite them, and I'm going to add that 5/16 washer. All right, so my ball joint's going to sit right into the spindle there, nice and easy, no problem there. But I'm not going to use the locking tabs because one of them actually broke, and I don't have new ones. So lock washers and Loctite will do the trick. Obviously, you don't want these loosening up on you. All right, ball joint is in there and sitting flush. And don't forget, if you didn't watch the other disassembly video, watch it, because if you don't remove that original insert for the 3-piece ball joint, this will not fit. Has to be taken out in order for this new joint to fit. And also, you don't have to order anything special to get these. When you order a ball joint now for, say, an 86 XJ6, they're going to send you the 1-piece joint. They're not going to send you anything with that 3-piece setup. All right, so I'm going to put the spindle up in here. I never took any of this stuff apart, so my spring plate is still attached. My lower shock mount is still attached. I didn't mess with any of that stuff. Now, lower ball joint did not come with a new washer, but I have my originals that I saved, so I will use that. And again, there's no castle nut, no cotter pins with the Jaguar joints. It's all nylon lock nuts. So I'm going to fit this up in here like that. Keep a hold of it. Washer on. Nut on there. Get that tightened up somewhat. That's a 7/8. All right, so I'm starting to tighten down this nut. The ball joint is spinning, so I'm going to have to probably put a floor jack under it to wedge the joint up into the spindle to get that to stop. But I can do that after we get further along here. So I think next thing will be upper control arm and the upper ball joint. All right, so I've got the upper control arm. It's going to mount like this on the frame. So this is the front and this is the rear. And I'm going to get my new ball joint here. And this is going to bolt in to the control arm. That, yeah, I can set this like this. Maybe that looks a little better. So this is the front of the car and this is the rear of the truck. Remember now, we've got 2 bolts to hold that in place. Long one and a short one, can't mix those up. 2 nylon lock nuts that go with those. And then we have the shims. Now there were 3 on this side. Sometimes I have 3, sometimes I have 4, but I've never had more than 4. And these are for adjusting the caster. Now remember, I like max caster, so I'm going to put those shims all toward the front of the vehicle. As far as the bolts, remember, they go in from the front to the rear. Like that. Shims do not have to go in yet because they're notched. So you just put the nylon locks on there. And then these shims, I'm going to put all 3 of them to the front of the truck. And you see how they're notched. So to put them in, I can just slide the ball joint out of the way, just slide it in like that, and then just let it fall over and it snaps right into place. Same thing, wedge it in, knock it over. So I have all 3 shims toward the front of the vehicle, which will move the ball joint to the rear, which gives me a maximum caster. And I'll just tighten those 2 bolts up and we'll install the arm. All right, so the upper control arm is going to bolt on to the tower right here. Okay, hard to see because everything's black, but you know. Now, the hardware for it, it's going to be a bolt with a nylon lock nut. There's going to be this triangle shaped wedge. I'll just sit here for now. And there's going to be a washer. Okay. Now you may also have shims here because this is how camber is adjusted with shims here, same as on a GM. I remove all the shims and just use this washer only to start. Reason being is, it seems that most of the time when I put these in, there is quite a bit of, is it positive camber where the wheel is tilted in or positives out? I think it's negative where it's tilted in. Anyway, I seem to see a lot of inward tilt. I think that's negative camber. So I'm not going to put any shims in it right now. The way I'm going to do this is bolt, triangle wedge, which goes in from this direction. So I'm going to slide this arm. I'm going to take the arm off so you can see what I'm doing here. So this triangle wedge actually matches the shape of the tower. Then we have the hardened washer, goes there. And I'm going to do the same thing with the second bolt. You got the bolt, the wedge, washer, and then the control arm is going to fit in. So we'll get these bolts through here. that. And then the nuts go on. I'll tighten them down, and that's all there is to installing the upper control arm. So if you needed to adjust camber in, you can add more shims in this area. I'm going to put them like that, and we'll see what it looks like when the truck's all together and on the ground. You tighten those up. All right, control arm is on. Just get that down in the spindle. Once again, I got to reuse my original flat washer because they don't give you one. And then the nylon lock nut. Get that tightened down. All right, next thing I'm going to put in is the lower part of the dust shield. And they use these little clamps to lock it onto the spindle. So I'm just going to set this up underneath like this. And it'll sit like that, if you can see that and how well it's going to show up. And then this hook just bolts right to the piece and then hooks around the spindle there. And you would have seen that when you took it apart, but it's just a 7/16 or 11 millimeter. This one goes to 11. Like that. And then we'll swing around front to the other piece of the dust shield. All right, now we'll do the front part of the dust shield. I threaded the upper caliper bolt in a little bit just as a guide. This will hook on that stud there. And the other one is a little bit loose, so just so it can move, because there is some wiggle room with this stuff. So we get that on there and that clamp. This one tight. Okay. And that should be that. All right, so with the front dust shield on, next thing is going to be the steering arm and this bracket. And it's a bit of a puzzle here. So this is going to go behind the dust shield. This is going to go in front of the dust shield. And the bolt we're going to use is a shorter bolt without the holes for the safety wire. So I'm just going to put the bolt through that for now. Then I got to fish this up here and get it through everything. Hold on here. This has to go like this. So that's behind the steering arm. So it kind of looks like that. And this has to go like this. All right, so that goes like that. Then I'm going to take the longer caliper bolt and just put it through the steering arm and the spindle just to line things up. And then I can tighten up the upper bolt. Take pictures when you take this stuff apart because it's quite the puzzle. Now the other thing is this has to line up as well. The other bolt in the bracket is for the caliper bolt to go through as well. So that has to line up as well. Then I should be able to tighten this up like that. And then these guys should come out smooth. And then I know everything's aligned. So that's good. All right, and we're using anti-seize on everything, so it'll come apart someday. All right, brackets on, dust shield's on. Next is going to be caliper. All right, going to put gloves back on because the anti-seize is getting on everything. All right, now the caliper is it's got to go in here. And I'll start with the upper bolt. And get that in. I think it started. Let's see. That's going in all right. And then the bottom bolt goes in. And remember, we're not going to tighten anything down yet because I got to see clearances here for the shims on the caliper. All right. Upper bolt is tight. See what we're looking like for clearance. All right, so with the upper steering arm tight, so the steering arm is tight, and there's our caliper. You can see that gap. Let's see if I can get something to point out, but it's right there. There's a gap between the casting, the black casting, and the red caliper there. So I've got to put shims in there to take that up. Let's see what we got. All right, so it looks like out of the 4 shims I found misplaced when I took this apart, looks like 3 of them will fit in there. They'll be the correct distance. So if I pull the bolt back, I can push those 3 shims right in there. There they are. And they make up the clearance between the steering arm and the caliper. Something that's overlooked a lot, as I explained on the disassembly video. So with those in place, I can tighten up both of the caliper bolts now. All right, with the caliper on, still got to put our pads in here. You can throw the shock in. I'm going to put the bolt in from the front so I can get it out easier in the future. Let's see here. 8. Off a little bit. Get our bolt in the front. We'll come back. That. Go. Now I can tighten these up. Maybe do it the right way. Shock is in. All right, next I'm going to put the pads back in. I'm just going to wire brush the areas where the pads are going to slide. Clean them up a little bit. Get in there. There it goes. All right. All right, with the pads in there, next we'll put the pins in. And we have our springs for the pads. So I'm going to put the bottom pin in first. And then put the locking pin in. This guy here. That just goes into the hole in the pin. Alright, so that can't come out. Then we have springs, 2 of these, and they're going to hook on the pin and then push onto the pads. My other spring. Go like this. And then the next pin has to go through those. So I got to push this pin, push the spring in, and get it lined up with the hole. That the pin goes through. So I'm going to push that in. Get it? Yeah, like that. And I got to go through the other pad. You can see this. This one's got to get pushed in. Push the pin through. Come on, where are we hooked on here? There it goes. That. Through. I am off a little bit. I'm going to pull it this way. All right, so there I have both pins through, hooked on the springs, and then I got to put the upper locking clip in. Here's the hole that I can't see with the sun. Hold on here. I got to rotate the pin a little bit. Okay. Let me get this in here. And that will be it for the brake pads. Pretty simple. Just a puzzle. And now we got the usual NECs on everything. All right, almost done here. Sun is getting a little bright. Last thing I'm going to do here is a new brake hose. And that just mounts into our bracket. Now, you saved the lock washers and the nut from your original hose, right? Yeah, I hope so. Because you're going to need them. Because they don't come with it. Get that. Like that. Get this lined up here. As well. All right, let me get some wrenches. I think these are 15 millimeter. They are. Get some wrenches and tighten that down. All right, so that's all tightened up. 15 millimeter for the hose nuts and then 13 millimeter for the hard line. Other end of the brake hose is going in the frame. Same deal. It's got lock washers, and a 15 millimeter nut that'll go on the inside of the frame. Tighten that down. Put a piece of tape on it so it doesn't get any dirt in it. And that will be it. And then we'll just show what it all looks like. All right, there you go. Assembled. And really now, I can take out my threaded rod that's compressing the spring and get that out of there. Could do it now, could do it later. I don't think it'll matter a whole lot. But I think I'll take it out now just to get it out of the way. That'll end up putting this down in the bump stops. And then you can see with the shock mounts how on this distance here, you got to keep that reasonable so that the shock body doesn't want to hit that when it compresses. Other than that, pretty straightforward. All right, so now what I'm going to do is do the same thing on the passenger side off camera, and then when I come back, we'll get into steering rack. Front sway bar has to go on, and then I think that's it for the front suspension. All right, both sides are done and assembled. All looks good. Next thing I'm going to do is the front sway bar, which is nothing special. The only thing I want to mention is these are the original sway bar mounts, and I can't find these anymore for sale. So universal sway bar mount is probably the way to go. Now I bought these cheap on Amazon. They're solid, so I got to cut a slice in them. And I don't know if these are just egged out, but I could have sworn I bought the right size bushing, and the hole looks kind of smaller on that. I don't know if it's going to work or not. Maybe if I cut a chunk out of it, but I'm going to put a slice in this and give it a shot. As far as the end link bushings, those you can get. That's no big deal. I've got a pile of them here. I'm not using polyurethane, which, you know, if you want the better stuff, polyurethane's the way to go. But to tell you the truth, this is a pickup truck. It's going to handle very, very nicely with this Jag front, whether it's got rubber bushings on the sway bar or polyurethane. They work really good. But I'll put it together and I'll let you know if this works out. All right, those sway bar bushings did not work. They would have worked if I wanted to waste a whole lot of time messing with them, but not worth the time. So I put the original sway bar bushings back in with new end link bushings. So sway bars in, I'll look into polyurethane bushings or something in the future. Those bushings were definitely not what I thought they were, but it's okay. The originals really are not that trashed. They'll do just fine. So, almost done here. Next thing will be steering rack. Swap out the steering rack bushings for polyurethane, get that installed, and then I think we're done with the front suspension. So let's get that steering rack done. All right, it is a new day, and we're almost done with this front suspension. Hello. So, got to get the steering rack in. Only thing to do here is replace the 3 mounting bushings. I have one already removed just so I could show you some detail. Now, they make a tool to press these out, which I do not have. I have pressed them out in the past with sockets, but it's not easy to find a socket that'll do it to push it out because it's a very thin wall bushing that goes in there. So, for those of you who don't have a lathe and can't turn down a tool to press these out, because that's what I would do, this is how you do it the cheap way, or I'll say my way I would do it before I had a lathe. First thing you gotta do is get the center sleeve out of the bushing, which in a lot of cases is already done for you, like this one. It's already broken loose, part of the reason that the bushing is garbage. Next thing is to get that rubber out of there, at least in one area, to get down to the metal shell. And you can do that just with a drill and just kind of work it back and forth and get the rubber out of there until you get down to the sleeve. Then what I do is use the drill and a carbide bit and work back and forth inside the metal sleeve to get it very thin. You don't want to go so far that you get into the aluminum casting, obviously, but you want to thin this down. And then when it's in there, you can just whale it with a sharp chisel or your favorite destroyed screwdriver and collapse it, which is what I did here to this one. And then once it's collapsed, it'll just knock right out of there. All right, so for this one, I'll start working on the rubber. All right, I got a bunch of the rubber out, but now I'm using the carbide to get more of it out. All right, I took out some of the metal. I don't know if I've gotten it ground down enough, but we'll try. There it goes. You can see that just collapsed, or can you? You see, I just hit that with the homemade chisel there, and its bushing shell is collapsing, and we'll just knock it out of there. There it goes. Then after you're done, I'll just take a piece of Scotch-Brite and go in there and clean up the hole a little bit. Just in case there's any burrs or anything in there. But if you're careful, you won't do anything to it, but there's still would be some rust in there because of the sleeves are steel and they get rust in there. That looks good. I'll get the last one out and then we'll come back and put the new bushings in, which will be easy. And this bushing here, the sleeve is still stuck in there, glued in there, so I'm just going to use a little drill bit, it's probably an 1/8 inch, and just drill the rubber all the way around. Gotta hate this Ryobi drill. Somebody get me a coupon or something so I can get myself back into a Milwaukee, a Makita, because my Makita lasted many, many, many years. I let the smoke out a little while ago, and I bought this, and I don't like it. It is weak, the batteries don't last, and the grip on the drill bits is not good. Disappointed in it. So somebody get me back into a Makita somehow. Anyway, I'm going to drill around this sleeve, get the sleeve knocked out, and do what I just did with the other sleeve, and use the carbide bit to thin it out, punch it out, and then we'll come back. All right, bushings are out. And I wanted to say, I looked online last night, and I did find plenty of sources for the brand new sway bar bushings for the XJ6, just called in 1986. And the only thing is they're not available on Rock Auto anymore for some reason, but I did find other suppliers, including they're polyurethane. They're called no-thane. Polyurethane is probably a trademark name. Just like this is probably something different. So these are the steering bushings, rack bushings that I bought. This is off of Amazon. It's Prothane, part number 11-41009. Now the reason I mention that is because if you look this up on Amazon, it'll say it does not fit a 1986 XJ6. It's listed as Jaguar and Land Rover, I think. But it says it doesn't fit. But because I've been doing this a while, I have some other sets on the shelf that I bought years ago that were for the XJ6, and I compared them, and they are the same. This is easy. That's all you got. You got this, they call it Prothane. It's polyurethane, I'm sure. Bushing, a sleeve, and a bushing. And it just goes together in here. Now it's a little bit of a tight fit. There it goes. Tap it in. Like like that. And then you have the sleeve, and then the other half. And that's it. It's in there. Now, they give you grease with these, but this is not going to move. They make suspension bushings and stuff in this as well, and then you'd want to grease them because it's going to be moving. This is not going to move. Once this is bolted in, it's in. It's not going to move. So I'm not going to use the grease. I'll save it for another time. We'll put the other two bushings in, which is much easier than the removal. Straight. And then we'll get it bolted in. And the steering will no longer be sloppy because those original bushings were so bad that the whole steering rack was moving when you turn the steering wheel until the bushing bottomed out and then the steering turned. So let's get it in. All right, so we're gonna put the rack back in. Now, one thing, when you use these polyurethane mounts, this shim that used to be on the driver's side, no longer needed. So it's just gonna be the bushings and the bolts. That's it. All right, there we go. Connect the tie rod ends, and that's it for the rack. All right, steering rack is in, and that is it for the front suspension. That is a whole lot of black paint, but everything's clean, which is the whole idea of this. So you have to work on it. It's not a big old mud pit, dirt pit, grease pit, whatever you want to call it. It'll be not a big deal to work on. So everything's all done. Front end is rebuilt as it needed to be, which is pretty much just ball joints. The control arm bushings were all good. Tie rod ends were good. We did the rack bushings, all that kind of stuff. Changed the front tires to 215/70s, so I got my taller tire on there, which is what I wanted. And the BFGs that were on there, the 215/60s, I will sell those, and that'll offset some of the cost because these were cheap. And you'll see. Let's go over the numbers where we are now on this thing. All right, it is finally time to look at numbers again. Haven't had to add anything or work anything for a while. And what do you think about this shirt? My wife doesn't like this shirt. It was a free shirt. It's a garage shirt. It was given to me for free. She doesn't like it. Anyway, here's a new piece of cardboard. The old one was getting so you couldn't read it. If you haven't been following along, this is how it works. We have the part I'm installing, the value of the part, what the cost of the part was out of my pocket, how much cash I actually lay out for it, and then how that equates to the value of the truck versus what the truck cost me. My goal is for the truck to cost me $5,000 or less. That's the goal. As an example, if you look over here on the original page, pick something. The truck bed, you have to read through this to figure that out. Is this working? Well, okay, here we go. So the engine and transmission, PCM and wiring. I put a value of that of $750 for all that if you had to, buy it off of Marketplace or whatever. But it cost me nothing because I had the parts truck. So it was free in the end. The truck actually made money. That's how I'm keeping this reasonable. So this is where we are right now. The last thing that got installed was the steering linkage, which was $75 value and $75 out of my pocket because it was all brand new. And the current truck value is $42.15, but the current truck cost is only $12.95. So let me add in all the things for the front suspension and we'll see where we ended up now. All right, here's everything that I spent on the front suspension build and how it worked out. So, shocks were $40. Got those off of Rock Auto. Ball joints were $50. That's for uppers and lowers. Got those on Amazon. You can also get them on Rock Auto. And we'll go over the numbers here. So the shocks got me to truck value $42.55. Out of pocket, $13.35. Ball joints got the truck to $43.05. Out of pocket, $13.85. Front brake hoses, again, Rock Auto, $20. Got the truck to $43.25. $14.05 out of pocket. End link bushings, only $5. Again, Rock Auto, $43.30, $14.10. The main sway bar bushings, I reuse the originals for now, so I'll have to buy some more and put them in there. Rack bushings, the polyurethane bushings were $20, Amazon. And again, like I said, they were not listed for 86 XJ6, but they do fit. You got the part number. That got the truck value to $43.50 and out of pocket, $14.30. Frame paint. Now, I used leftover paint. I had some leftover primer from when I did the Hudson. I used that as the primer. And I had some really old leftover Tractor Supply paint for the black. So I used it. I put down $40 for a value of the paint, and I counted it out of pocket as $40. It really wasn't. It didn't cost me $40 for that stuff because the paint was already long paid for in another build. So, but it doesn't matter. I put it in there. I needed front lug nuts. The Jaguar is 1/2" 20. I didn't have any of the bulge cone type lugs for those mags. I wanted that, so $10. I think I got those on Amazon. They got your truck to $4,400, $14.80 out of pocket. Then I needed different front tires. Remember, I had two 1560s on those mags. Too short. Can't speak. Too short, not tall enough for the size of the fender opening. So I removed those and I will sell those and they will offset this cost. But believe it or not, I found a guy with two 1570 15s for $40. And that's a common size I use. So I bought all four. I had potluck, although the tread was good, but they were local and the tread was really good. So I got lucky. So $20 for two tires gets the value of the truck to $44.20. Out of pocket, $1,500. But then, the gift that keeps on giving. I still have a few things left from that 2001 Silverado that gave up the engine and transmission and everything else. I sold the steering column out of it, and I sold the dash cluster out of it, because the cluster all worked, and it had low miles, only like 144,000. Sold those two items for $50 cheap just to get them gone. It doesn't affect the value of the truck, still $44.20. But it did lower my out-of-pocket expense to $14.50. So that's it for the front suspension. We're halfway done with making this a roller again, and I got to get it to be a roller soon because I need this lift. I got to get this thing rolled out of here and get the cab out of here as well. I realized a lot of this stuff was Jaguar-specific type things, and maybe not everybody's going to be interested in that. I get that totally, but I think it was important for me to put it out there for those who are. So for those who are still sticking through this, we're going to get into like generic truck stuff real soon and build stuff. You know that if you've seen my other builds. I do all kind of things that will be applicable to many different builds. So thank you for sticking around. Thank you for subscribing. I hope it's, if not entertaining, maybe a little educational. I don't know. I don't know everything. I'm still learning. It is what it is. But thank you so much for watching. Thank you for subscribing. And next will be rear suspension on this thing, so I can get this frame rolling and get it the hell out of this bay. See ya.